All right, we are now recording. We're going to finish our talk on intelligence. Today, specifically, I'm going to finish talking about another theory of intelligence that we briefly talked about last time. And we're going to discuss a little bit what giftedness and developmental delays look like and how we deal with that. And then I have a vignette or a case study for us to work on as a group. All right, so before I get into that, are there any questions at all regarding the class, anything, assignments, group work, anything? Silence is golden. Okay.
Can you explain the like, do we still only one of us from our group submit the outline, or all of us have to submit it?
Just one person from the group from here on out, just one assignment from the group. Now, everybody has to do the peer evaluations, and those go in a separate Dropbox. I think it wasn't this class. I think it was another class. Everybody in the group, one of the groups, submitted their peer evaluations into the group assignment, which is not allowed. And I can lock that down to just one assignment. One submission, and that's it. The only problem with that is I noticed some groups tend to want to submit something else because they forgot like the reference page or something like that. So I leave that open in case you have to add something else. But anyway, yeah, so just make sure I just need one submission from the group. If I get more, I'll just pick one, and hopefully it's the right one that your group wanted to submit. But I've had that happen where I graded just one and it wasn't the right one because somebody else submitted one, and it wasn't right. But so yeah. Any other questions regarding the group? And by the way, just for your information, if you could make sure that you have your title page for this and your reference page. So on top of having your 2, 3, 4 page of outline, before that, you'll have an APA formatted title page and a reference page at the end. Another common mistake is everything is going to be double spaced, including your title page and reference page. All font has to be 12 point Times New Roman. So please keep those in mind as you're drafting those this week. All right. Any other questions? Okay. All right. So let's get started with our finishing up on intelligence. So I left you off with just kind of an idea of where we started defining intelligence as just the general ability of somebody to adapt to their environment, given novel situations. We had a couple major players like the Binet and who helped with the Stanford Binet test, was able to observe certain traits and then quantify them by spitting out a number, which we now know as an IQ. Now, how the IQ has morphed, how we calculate the IQ has morphed over decades, over the last century, really, to what we arrive today, where we still use the Stanford Binet and we still use the Wechsler intelligence scales for children and adults even. So they've got two different ones, one for children, one for adult. If you're working with children, you'll be very familiar with the WISC. I think it's WISC. I think we're still on WISC 4, I believe. I haven't used it in a couple of years, but I used to run those tests. So anyway, that's how we measure. Now, one of the problems and one of the criticisms with intelligence is we as a world, as a people, get smarter, don't we? And if you think back, and I don't know as though anybody's my age here, but we didn't have smartphones. I probably couldn't tell you. Getting on the internet took about 15 minutes with getting into the dial-up. It was just very simple. If you gave somebody a computer, a modern day computer, 30 years ago and told them to figure it out, they would be lost. They would have no background as to what computers are really, let alone how to turn them on and access the internet and any kind of settings. So we as a people have started to take more information in and adapt it to newer technology. So we're just recently we just have a lot of information that floats around us, and we're able to absorb it, and we're able to regurgitate it and work with it and produce outputs. So the problem with these tests is they are not timeless. So if you took an intelligence test, everybody in this class, if you took an intelligence test back in that was formulated back in the 1970s, I think was the WISC-1, you would probably be a genius because you just have so much knowledge that you've been exposed to, and you've been prepped with your processing speed and your working memory, that you would have registered as a genius back in the 1970s or 1980s, right? Today, yes, everybody in the group. I see your grades and everybody is doing fantastic. So I'm confident everybody would be a genius. Reading the chat, by the way. So anyway, these tests have to evolve over time, and that's why we've had so many iterations, like the WAIS, which is the Wechsler Adult Intelligence Scale. I think we're on our 5th edition of that, because that was developed back in the 70s and 80s. So that they needed to update those a little bit to make them a little bit more culturally relevant, right? Because our world has really gotten smaller with the advent of the internet. So anyway, there's a lot of criticism as to how we measure intelligence, because it's very much based on ability, how quickly we process things, how we work with our hands, how we work with our minds, vocabulary that we know, which is culturally sensitive, maybe analogies, which are still part of vocabulary, but analogies, how we compare one category to another, or one item to another. So anyway, it's very, very scholastic based. So what happened with Sternberg, he was another theorist that kind of broke the mold a little bit and thought outside the box and says, wait a minute, there's got to be more to intelligence than just arithmetic and processing and all that good stuff. So what he theorized is looking at people regardless. Oops, I think I just sent my thing to my television. Okay. Can you see that? Is that on there? All right. So Sternberg theorized that intelligence is marked by success. Now, what do we mean by that? What does success have to do with intelligence? Any guesses? What does success look like? What is success?
Like getting a job, a degree, money, family.
Okay. Goals, right? Meeting your goals. So if our goals are met, if we can set goals and then get from point A to point B and meet those goals, we can call that success, right? Or if somebody else sets goals for us and we meet them, we can call that success. So he theorized that when we look at intelligence, we're looking to see if people can meet their goals. And we can really see this at a young age. He really substantiated the claim that if we are that our intelligence remains pretty stable over time. So children that test high at a young age will probably be more successful as they grow up. Children that test lower in IQ receive a lower IQ score will probably not be as successful at an older age. So we see intelligence really remain stable over time. Now there are certain factors that could change. We can have diseases, or we can have some kind of disorder, muscular sclerosis, or cerebral palsy is actually something that comes out that is revealed after birth. But maybe any kind of organic brain tissue damage, Alzheimer's, could really reduce our intelligence, right? So there are ways that it usually goes from high to low, but it's some kind of intervention that occurs to make that happen. But in general, children with low IQs, in general, I'm not going to say 100% of the time, we don't see a remarkable increase over their lifespan, if that makes sense. Okay. So What he said, what Sternberg considered for his intelligence were 3 abilities. And they were analytic ability, creative ability, and what was the third one? Practical. Now, analytic. Is the child able to analyze the problem and generate solution? So are they able to identify a problem on their own usually, right? And generate a solution. So let me give you an example. We'll say, I don't know, I'm thinking of a name. We'll say Katie. I'm sorry if I have a Katie in this class. I'm not picking on you. It's a random name I came up with, I promise. We'll say Katie. We put 2-year-old Katie in a room, and usually at this time she has her sippy cup. She has her juice in her sippy cup, and she wants to get a drink. So we put the sippy cup up on high up on a table, and we give her some blocks and stuff in the room that she can play with. So Katie really wants a sippy cup. All right. How is she going to use what she has available to her to achieve her goal? Is she able to consider what she has in the room, those building blocks, instead of using them to play with? Maybe she could stand on them and reach that sippy cup. That would be an example of identifying a problem and generating a solution to that, right? We can also use that as an example for creativity, being flexible, right? She was being flexible in that situation because normally she just plays with the blocks, but this time she was using them as a tool to get what she wanted to meet her goals. So being flexible with novel situations. So that was something that she had not encountered before, but she was able to overcome and adapt, right? And then practical, knowing what solutions will work. Knowing what will work before you even try them. So a good example that I like to use for that, we'll say, say my car breaks down on the way to work. I'm driving to work and my car breaks down, and I'm upset. I'm really, really upset with this. And I'm not able to think outside the box to call somebody to get a ride, or maybe take a bus and leave my car there and come pick it up later. If I'm not able to come up with a solution that I know will work, then I'm going to run into problems, right? So I might be coming up with things that are just way, way outside. Maybe I'm going to call my mom, who's 3 hours away, telling her to come pick me up. Is that practical? Probably not, right? So that all 3 of these need to be present for Sternberg's intelligence to be measured. Okay. Now, with that, and I think this is a good segue to talk about children that are gifted, because we see this. We see all 3 of these qualities in children that are gifted. So what is a gifted child? Anybody have their own definition of what a gifted child would be?
Someone that's gifted has like a very high intelligence.
Okay. High IQ. What else? Anybody else have an idea?
Really good in like a certain area or subject.
Okay. All right. So subject subject expert. Okay. Or talent. We'll say talent. Okay. What else?
They're more creative and they can like give open-ended answers that don't necessarily have like a right answer.
Okay. All right. So we'll just say creative in thinking. Any other takers? I'm also going to call this divergent thinking. And that's it's a term I want you to become familiar with, because it's not going to be the last time we see this, okay? Especially when we talk about mental health and mental health disorders, because we look at divergent thinking. Divergent thinking helps us to understand what the person's skill sets are. Are they going to be able to acquire new skill sets in order to overcome their problems? Because that's really, in a nutshell, that's what this is all about when we talk about, especially mood disorders, is and I'm sorry, we're not going to be doing too much on mental health in this class, but we'll talk about it a little bit with adolescents. But being able to overcome their obstacles and their stumbling blocks, right? So divergent thinking is instrumental, and we see people that have displayed high capabilities of divergent thinking are really able to overcome their own problems, which reduces the likelihood that they're going to be suffering from mental health disorders later on in life, right? Another thing that I want to note here, and I think your book mentioned it, but I want to highlight it, is it is nurtured. Okay. This is important because I hear this a lot, and working in the field that I do, a lot of parents fear difference. They don't want their kid to be different, especially in this day and age, right? Because what do we have now that we didn't have 20, 30 years ago in the school system? When people are different, what happens?
Inclusion.
Exclusion. That's right. Maybe a little bit. Are you saying we're more inclusive now?
Yeah, I was saying we're more inclusive now. We allow the students to be in regular ed classes, or gifted students go to gifted class, but then come back to their regular ed classes.
Okay. Okay, I see what you're saying. Yeah, and and that's my fault. I asked this incorrectly. The school systems are more inclusive. You're right. We're focused on inclusivity and diversity, right? But children at a young age do what with kids that are different?
Judge them.
Judge them, bullying, right? Picking on them, making fun of them. We have Facebook now, which makes bullying a little tougher to deal with. So anyway, when children test really high, I sometimes, and probably more than you would believe, I get parents are proud about that. They're proud that their child may have tested so high and has a high IQ and high abilities. But more often than not, I can't say more often than not, a good percentage of the time, I get parents that do nothing with that because they don't know what that means. They don't want their child to be different. So having a conversation with them about what to do and how to nurture that gift is a very important topic to have, a very important discussion to have with that parent, right? Because maybe they don't understand it. They don't understand where it came from. Maybe they don't have the funding to send them to a private school or something, right? So those gifts unnurtured really don't mean a whole lot, and they're not going to expand upon them. That's not going to mean that they're not going to be successful in life. It's just going to be harder to get there, and we might see some other secondary problems come up. Like, for example, if you have a child that's gifted and he's sitting in a normal classroom, what kind of behavior issues do you think we're going to see?
He could become disruptive because he's bored in class.
Yeah, he's going to be bored. He's going to be wanting to do something. He probably just finished his test in 0 point crap seconds, and the rest of his peers are going to be spending the next half hour. He's going to be bored, and we know when children are bored, they get into things. So it's very important to consider these when dealing with children that are gifted, right? So anyway, I think we really, high IQ. We look at, and this is ballpark, we say anything 130 and above would be in the gifted category. Subject talent, usually something specific or a clump of them. We could say maybe even sports or music, right? Somebody might be musically talented. They are not only creative, but they are also passionate about it. So if they have I'm not gonna say an unnatural, like a natural passion where they're fixated on music, they're fixated on reading, maybe they're fixated on Legos, whatever that fixation is. Building, again, using that nurture, recognizing that passion, and nurturing that to make something out of it for them, right? Potentially. That's not saying that children that are passionate about something might be gifted. They might be, but they might not be. So nurturing is one of those really delicate balances, and we'll talk about that when we get into parenting styles. But it's possible to over nurture somebody, right? Doing things for them or pushing them in a direction that they don't want to be in, because again, we might see secondary behaviors rise up out of that. I think one of the best examples, I had this client that I was working with, and the parents really, the dad was just like a diehard football fan, and he really, really wanted his child to be a football player. So we'll call him Billy. He was in 5th grade, and dad just really wanted him to get into Pee Wee football. So he put him in there. The child didn't want to go. The coach wouldn't play him because he was always goofing off on the bench. He wasn't really doing anything. And this created kind of an expectation between dad and child, which was really tough for them to get over. Many, many years later, I got to see them as a client, and I had to sit down with dad and let him know, maybe your expectations are not what he wants. So how can we align that? How can we get what his natural talents and abilities and passions are to be understood and accepted by dad? So that can happen if expectations are too high by the parent, right? All right. So anyway, just some things to think about when we're getting into our, I believe you're going to have gifted and disability as part of your assignment. Let's see. So let's talk about the other end of the spectrum. Disabilities, developmental delays, right? And they could take many forms. Your book talked about Down syndrome. We could see intellectual disabilities. Intellectual disability. So what that looks like, that doesn't necessarily mean that there's anything wrong emotionally with that person. That child may not be disruptive. However, they may not be grasping concepts. They're lacking ability to grasp concepts like we were talking about before, right? Thinking outside the box. Like if we see little Susie, that's the 2-year-old that was trying to get her sippy cup. If she has all the tools in the room and she wants that sippy cup and she's not able to attain her goals, that might be considered not meeting a certain milestone. If she's not able to use what she has available to her to get her goals, we can start looking at maybe doing some other tests with her to see if she can pass and meet those goals, right? So intellectual disabilities is lacking adaptability. They don't tend to adapt to their environment very easily.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, it kind of has to do with this. So I have a cousin who has a son who just turned 2. Is his right now, he barely can say any words and stuff. Is that a sign of the start of some sort of disability thing, or is it just I don't know?
Are there? Does he have older siblings?
No.
Oh, so he's the oldest?
Yeah, he's only what, my cousin or the
Yeah.
baby? Oh yeah, he has 2 brothers. He's the youngest of them.
Okay. That's not that uncommon. 2 years old is right around where we start seeing a firm grasp of language. I've seen 2-year-olds that really have not talked. They understand, like if you say cuppy or sippy cup or diaper or something like that, they understand. They understand the language. But for the most part, I usually see this with multiple sibling homes, and especially with the youngest or the newest sibling. Because the other two, the older siblings are doing all the talking, right? They're doing all the stuff, and the youngest one is just watching. So it's not uncommon. I would say if it goes much into like 3 years old, that would probably be a strong indicator that something might be wrong. But for the most part, yeah, I mean, I've seen 2-year-olds that they don't say a word, and then all of a sudden they're talking in full sentences. That happens a lot. So yeah, I mean, it's something to watch out for, but I wouldn't say, jump to looking at intellectual disabilities, but that would be a marker that if there are other factors like not being able to grasp, we talked about object permanence. If that's not happening, like if you make something disappear and at 2 years old, they're still not grasping that it exists or it is where he or she left it, then there might be something there. So yeah, I mean, there are ways to really kind of check the boxes to see if milestones are being met. But I wouldn't say lacking talking at 2 would be a strong indicator. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
Yep.
I was just curious.
So intellectual disabilities, where do they come from? All right, we talked about a couple of them already. It could be biomedical, like cerebral palsy, right? Biomedical, that would be a biomedical explanation. That's lack of oxygen to the brain as they're born could likely cause brain damage or cerebral palsy, right? Could be social. What do I mean by social? What does social have to do with intellectual abilities?
So sometimes if a kid's bullied or something, they stop talking and then they just don't they just don't speak for like a really really long time until
Okay.
they end up developing maybe some speaking issue in the future.
Yeah, okay, that could be. That's a very, I actually didn't even consider that, but I was thinking more along the lines of not socializing, because part of our intelligence is being able to work through problems, and working through problems, we do that by communicating. And if we don't have those communication skills, that could lead to lower IQ or lower problem solving abilities. But yeah, you're absolutely right. I didn't even consider that. Having some kind of traumatic situation or traumatic environment that leads a person to not wanting to communicate, right? So that it works both ways. So yeah, social could hinder intellectual ability. Behavioral. What do I mean by behavioral? What kind of behaviors would hinder intellectual disabilities?
A lot of people with intellectual disabilities have problem behaviors because of frustrations that they have, either like academically, not being able to communicate, or other things like that. So they tend to act out and have problem behaviors a lot.
Okay, yeah, and that could be secondary to intellectual disabilities, is what you're saying, right? Or coinciding, comorbid with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's often the case. But we may also see something like ADHD, which is a hyperactivity. It's a constant firing in a child's mind and their brain that's causing them to be all over the place. They may be very smart, but their ability to latch on and grasp something that's being taught to them might be stifled because they're so hyper. Does that make sense? So behavior might
Yeah.
be part.
They also
Or if go ahead.
uh, they also might become like very nervous to be outspoken because
Mhm.
they don't want to get made fun of or something for like what they think like right or something, and they end up wrong or something.
Yeah. So that might be an example of behavioral. And what about tantrums? Like we talked about learning a couple last week, right? Was that last week? I think it was last week or 2 weeks ago. We talked about learning. So what if a child learns bad behaviors, like throwing, I think it was Billy, as a matter of fact, Billy and his dad. Billy was trying to get candy bars from dad, so he was throwing tantrums, right? And dad did what? Gave him the candy bars, right? So he is teaching bad behaviors there. So you may have a very brilliant child that has bad behaviors and goes into school, and when they don't get what they want, they throw a tantrum, right? That is not a well-adjusted child who is going to be able to learn. So that might stifle.
Could it also be like, I don't know if this is the right term, but like behavioral norms, like in society, like not understanding like in certain places you're supposed to act like certain ways?
Yeah, and again, that comes from socialization, right? We learn that through socializing, either with from parents having their kids interact with other kids, or allowing a child to play in the neighborhood or around, kind of expanding their ecosystem a little bit to include other laws and regulations that other people expect of them, right? Another one, and I really want to point this out, is education. This is a big one for intellectual abilities, right? What if the child doesn't have access to good education? That happens. That happens more than you think. Maybe the parents are homeschooling because they don't have the money to send their child to school. Or if they do send them to school, maybe they're inner city and it's not such a great school. And there are a lot of problems there. Again, so we got social issues, behavioral issues, and education issues. Biomedical is probably fine. They're on par with meeting all their milestones. But given this is like the trifecta here, is you have a bad school system that teachers are probably not at their best. You have a social dilemma because they're around violence and negativity all day, which are probably going to raise behavioral issues, right? And your book talks a lot about that, as far as socioeconomic status and lacking those options. I kind of wanted to go into that a little bit more, but I want to spend some time doing this all right. Oh, by the way, so intellectual disabilities, we consider somebody intellectually displaying intellectual disabilities if their IQ is less than 70. That's one of the criteria. Okay. Another disability would be a learning disability. Now, learning disability is not necessarily a low IQ. It may just be a difficult time encoding. We talked about encoding into memory, encoding information into their brain, whatever that looks like. This happens relatively frequently. It's estimated that children in the US, about 5% of them suffer from learning disabilities. And that could vary. That could be reading, that could be math. We call it reading dyslexia or developmental dyslexia, and math dyslexia. That's a thing if children aren't able to process logically numbers. And just to caveat that, I'm throwing these terms out there and we really know very little. In fact, math dyslexia is a relatively recent concept that we started putting in our books. We've known about it. We know that dyslexia was a thing. It was very specialized to reading, and we kind of assumed because reading was a problem that math followed on. But we're learning now that that there are two different types of dyslexia. You may have a child that reads well and does not do math well. That doesn't mean if you don't do math well, you have dyslexia, by the way. I'm not a fan of math, and I mean, you've seen me try to add stuff up in this class. That does not mean I have a learning disability. Okay, so don't try and use that if many of you are probably going to be going into math. But if you do, if you genuinely have, or if you work with children that seem to not be able to grasp numbers as well as others, and any kind of tutoring is not helpful, then, you know, it might be worth having them tested to see if there is a deficiency in their ability to encode those numbers.
I have a question.
Yep, go ahead.
So in the book, it says with a learning disability, it says not suffering from other conditions that could explain poor performance, such as a sensory impairment or inadequate instruction. When it comes to a sensory impairment, would that like be something like a speech disorder or hearing? Like, because I know you said something about ADHD for intellectual disability. So how would you like determine what would be an impairment versus like something that would cause an intellectual disability?
Let me give you an example. So we have, well, I'll use her name, Susie, and this is an actual case that I had to, that I was able to work with. So Susie, at 5 years old, entered the school system, and she wasn't, they're giving her information to read, and she wasn't paying attention. She was just kind of all over the place. When she was reading, it was just very slowly. And she went for a couple years before it was realized that she wasn't really able to see the book. It was her eyesight, and somehow her parents and her doctor had overlooked the fact that she was partially blind in one eye, and it was very difficult for her to see. So that would show up as kind of it would look like a learning disability, but it wasn't. It was actually her sensory. So that could be true for hearing. Not so much, not so much taste and smell or touch or anything, because, we don't really use those to input mass information from books and videos and stuff into our heads. So, but yeah, so if there's a sensory problem, like either with hearing or sight, then we can say that it's not really a learning disability.
So it would fall under the intellectual disability?
Nope. It would just be sensory. It would just be that they aren't able to see. Now, once they got her glasses, she was doing fine. They had to go back and teach her a little bit more, but she was meeting all of her milestones. It was just getting her into the school system. She was struggling with reading for a while until I think it was about the end of her first grade year that they figured out that it was her eyesight that was causing the difficult in reading. And like I said, once they got her vision, it was great. All right. Did you have a question?
No, I just talk to myself.
Okay.
Right.
You can do that. You're welcome to do that. Just do it on mute, okay?
Yeah.
All right.
Because I had a sensory disability myself, so
Okay, so you kind of know what I'm talking about here, that either vision or hearing, it's a little difficult to learn.
I'm half deaf, so I really struggled in elementary school myself. And I had to take speech classes and all, and I got lucky 'cause I had a twin sisters who always understood what I said, even though nobody else did. So my sister always wanted to, say whatever I had to say.
Yeah. It's kind of a funny little twist to that, huh?
Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing that. That's very brave of you to share that with us. Okay, so let's give this a try. Let's see how you do. I'm going to break you off into groups of. We'll do groups of 4. We'll keep it light today, so I don't have so many groups. So I'm going to break you off into groups of 4 in D2L. Under week 6 resources, you'll see case study number 2 or case study 2. I've got 2 files in there. You can pick which one you work. If you have Word, you can use the Word. If you don't have Word, you can use the PDF. So whichever you prefer. But I'm going to go ahead, break you off into groups now, and just go check that out for, let's see, 1, 2, 3. Okay. And see what you come up with. See if you're able to figure out what's going on with Janet. All right. And before I do this, I forgot her name. I had somebody that's a student helper. Who is that? Maybe she's not in here today. Are there any student helpers in the class today? Okay. All right, maybe not. All right, so I'm going to break you off now and give you about 5 minutes, and then we'll meet back here. All right. All right, a couple more minutes for all the students to return. I'm sorry, a couple more minutes, 20 more seconds. That's a long weekend, right? Is a holiday weekend?
Wait, so why don't we have class on Monday? What holiday is it?
Do you have class on Monday?
Columbus Day.
Okay.
No,
Who-
our day schedule goes to our Tuesday. Like we have classes, we have our Monday class on Tuesday, but we just don't have no classes on Monday.
Oh,
Oh.
okay. So it's just that it's a switch week. It's not that it's based off of a holiday.
Well, Monday's Columbus Day and we're off.
Yeah,
Technically off.
Oh, okay.
and I think they now call it Indigenous Peoples Day. So, yeah, so that's yeah, so Monday is a holiday. So whatever, if you have any live classes, you shouldn't. I don't know any. I'm not meeting with anybody on Monday, so we won't meet until Thursday of next week, I guess. So anyway, let's get through this here so I can get you out of here a little earlier today. So Janet is a 7th grader, cannot understand algebra. She tries for hours at a time, but cannot seem to grasp the concepts. Since they were concerned about her, Janet's parents arranged to have her take an intelligence test, which revealed an IQ of 105. In most other subjects, Janet gets fairly good grades. So what do you think? Does Janet have a learning disability?
I said that she doesn't.
You said that she doesn't. Okay.
Oh, yes, only because it's just a concept, not the whole math class. Like it's just she can't understand algebra, not like everything else.
Okay. Okay. Did anybody else think differently?
I would say, oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say that it seems like she might have a learning disability, like the developmental dyscalculia, because
Okay.
she has the normal IQ, but she seems to be like struggling with these concepts, so it might be like a problem with like encoding and being able to like understand the math.
Okay. Okay. Let me. So let's kind of do this by the numbers here. So what are our requirements for a learning disability? Difficult mastering a subject, right? Do we have that? Check.
Yes.
How about normal intelligence?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. How about other conditions?
Not
No.
that. No, because it didn't really give us much information further
Okay.
from that.
So we really don't know, really. Okay. All right. So we are meeting maybe 2 of the 3, but this one is questionable, is what we're saying. So if she had no other conditions, we might be able to explain it a little bit better and determine whether or not she has a disability. What other information about Janet would you like to know before classifying her learning disability?
Maybe if she
Functioning normally.
If she's functioning normally, okay. Usually that's determined. Go ahead.
I was going to say her senses, like hearing, sight, things like that. Make sure she doesn't have anything going on there.
Okay, so check out her senses. See what her senses. If she needs glasses, corrective vision, or something. I would probably guess that she probably is okay because let's see, arranging to have her take. In most other subjects, she's getting fairly good grades. So I would say that she's probably her senses are good. I would just venture to say that, because based on, she would be displaying issues in other areas, is what I'm saying. So reading would be a problem if it was eyesight, or if it was auditory. Yeah, again, reading and comprehension and following instructions might be another issue. But so I would, based on what I'm getting from here, I would say she probably has, her senses are good. Okay. And maybe you do want to test that just to make sure. Okay. So how about 3? If Janet doesn't have a learning disability, what might account for her poor performance in algebra? What sort of things would you look at?
Maybe the way it's being taught.
Okay. All right. Why would that be an issue?
Cause sometimes maybe the way the teacher's teaching it is in the way in the best way she understands it. Maybe
All
if
right.
they took a different approach, she might understand it. Maybe.
Okay. There
Yeah,
might be a
you better follow
personality
up on that.
conflict, right? Maybe
Yeah.
the teacher's a little bit more abrasive than and off-putting than Janet would like her to be or is comfortable with. So that might be an issue. Her teaching style, the teacher's her learning style or the teacher's teaching style might be a little bit off, right? Another thing to consider, and I put this up on the chart on the screen, because if you look back at Gardner's theory of intelligence, kind of pinpointed about 7 areas, 9. It looks like. See, I'm not great at math either. 8 areas. Okay, fluid intelligence. Okay, seems to be okay. Crystallized intelligence, able to no problems with reading that we know of. Memory span, probably okay if she got a 105 on her IQ test. Usually these things are fleshed out in IQ tests. Maybe it might be somewhere with, actually, I didn't put the right one up here. Maybe she is just not mathematically inclined. That could be a possibility too, right? So what about 8? I'm sorry, what about the last one here? Janet May, what suggestions do you have for Janet, her teacher, and her parents for improving her performance in algebra?
Maybe a suggestion for the teacher is to modify her classroom better for like her learning needs. Like
Mhm.
depending on like whether or not she's just handing them worksheets and instead of actually like getting them up and about and like really trying to understand and grasp the content. Because I know some teachers just hand out worksheets a lot.
Yeah. I used to. So yeah, it's not effective for children that especially when they need that one-on-one attention. So coming up with a different approach. Maybe what else? I heard a couple of you
I
also
said
chiming in.
tutoring.
Tutor, good.
Tutoring.
Good. Giving her that extra level of support to maybe, again, she's not mathematically inclined and it's not her favorite subject. It doesn't speak to her. It's not interesting. So that might be a drawback for her, but getting her a tutor to kind of boost her up and boost her confidence in her ability in math might be helpful. Good. Anything else? How about matching it with something that she is interested in? For example, maybe she's musically inclined, so making a game out of it somehow. Or if she likes puzzles, working with math problems and puzzles, something, just making it, gear it towards her abilities. Now, the drawback, this, I mean, it sounds great, and I wish that would be the case in every situation where if a child was a little bit behind in a subject, that the teacher could arrange their teaching style to that student. Sometimes teachers have that ability to do that. They have that flexibility in their classroom to do that. Other times they're not. Maybe they have large classrooms and focusing on one child might be a problematic situation for them, right? So you really have to look at the school system, how the teacher is, if she has the resources available to her to break away from her other students and give individualized attention, but yeah, just working with that family to figure out what they can do to up her ability. But yeah, I would agree. I think she does not. I don't think there's enough information in this vignette to say that we have a learning disability. I think I get the feel from this that it is more of she just needs a little extra help with it. Okay. How'd y'all like that one? Fun? Yeah.
I think these learning disabilities specifically are kind of confusing because it's kind of vague to see if they actually do or not.
Mm-hmm.
I think this one was like a bit more challenging than the other ones.
Okay. Okay. And challenging in what way do you mean?
Just because like determining like if she actually does or not, like that was more challenging.
Yeah, yeah. And the idea behind these is if you don't have enough information, what information do you need? Start thinking about what you need. Maybe you know, we talked about sensory, getting her eyes checked or something like that. You're really, it's very, very, very rare that you have cases that come to you that are just cut and dry. This is what we need. This is the plan. It happens, but not very frequently. Usually there's just there may be some home problems. There's maybe bullying is going on. Maybe there's some stress. Maybe it could be one of many things. And you as an educator or a caseworker or a therapist, you're only getting a snapshot of that person throughout their week. So you really don't know what's going on in their personal lives, in their homes, or even in their heads sometimes. So they are designed to be a little more vague, but the idea behind these is what more, if you don't have enough information, what information do you need to get? Does that make sense? Does that kind of elaborate a little bit on what we do with these?
Yeah. Thank
Okay.
you.
Yep. Any other questions or comments? Okay. Well, with that, I'm going to stop recording here. I want to thank all of you for your attention.